We have a very small technical glitch or difficulty with our conversation tonight. There's a loop somewhere going on in someone's audio. We couldn't quite figure it out beforehand. So we're about to bring Matt into the conversation. But we need to kind of do it that mic gets turned off, question gets asked, mic gets turned on, answer gets asked. So it'll be it won't be quite as free flowing, but that doesn't really matter because what matters the most is the actual content in the conversation. So let us say good evening to Matt and bring him into the show. Hello, Matt. We could wave because if you turn your mic on, we'll get that like that. We'll get that feedback thing going on. So hello, lovely to have you. So let's just ask a question. Why don't you let us know kind of who you were? I mean, when we were talking about, and when we read writings on you, it talks about you as New Zealand's former party pill king. So why don't you tell us a bit about yourself, what you're about in that world of synthetic drugs, I guess, and party pills, that sort of thing, and then what happened around 2014 to you and your business, and then maybe we can look at what the government is proposing now and if that would work. This is where I throw you the ball.
Hey, thanks, Pat and Chewy, and good evening, everybody. My name is Matt Bowden, and I was born here in New Zealand in 1971. I guess when I sort of rose to prominence was early 2000s. We had an ecstasy death in the family, and then another close friend of mine died absolutely horrifically using methamphetamine and a samurai sword. And those two things in my life caused me to think, hey, maybe some of the drugs are a little too dangerous. Why are the drugs illegal? Why don't we have a quality control system instead? So I went to Wellington and said, who's writing the drug laws? Can I have a little chit chat? We've had some men lose their lives early and leave their children behind. Why don't we have quality control? And they said, well, Matt, because America told us that they would stop buying our meat and cheese if we tried to change the rules on drugs and do something pragmatic. And so I said, well, what if we set up a pharmaceutical company and created some safer alternatives that didn't kill people and weren't addictive? Couldn't we build a quality control system around that? And so that's what we did. I invented party pills, and it was because people were going crazy on meth and people were dying around me. And I wanted to do something about it. And we developed a pill that was going to be non-addictive and wouldn't kill people. And the over 8.5 years, we sold 26 million pills to 400,000 consumers on 10.5 million occasions. There were no deaths and no lasting injuries. And to give you an idea of the difference, if you had a young person in your life who was using party drugs and they had a drug overdose on Friday, under the old system, you'd be organizing a funeral on Monday, but with party pills, they'd be back at work on Monday. That's the difference it made, okay? And then synthetic cannabis came along. I wasn't excited about that. I don't like smoking, to be honest, and I don't really like vaping either. After that had been going for a couple of years, I got involved in trying to regulate, to build regulations around that, because my pharmaceutical team were coming to me. I had a team of chemists, and they said, hey, there's a million different molecules. These things are getting banned, blam, 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 blam. Some of them are benign. Some of them will cause heart attacks. Some of them are super carcinogens. A lot of them will kill people. If we had a quality control system, we could stop quite a lot of deaths. And so I did get involved with that, which I kind of regret in a way, but at the same time, I know that we were stopping people from dying. And so we built a system in New Zealand, and I got legislation through Parliament, which says if someone's inventing a drug for recreational use and they can show that it meets the same safety standards as a medicine, it's not toxic to any organs, it's not addictive, it's not going to kill people, then they're allowed to sell it. But we're going to put some quality control around the manufacture and the marketing. And so we've got all the capacity to do that. And I made a bit of a mistake and said, look, what we need is an alternative to alcohol. I'm going to create an alternative to alcohol now. And about 14 days later, the liquor industry went to the Prime Minister. Everything went bang. The laws changed overnight. Everything I was doing got made illegal. And the way that they did it was suddenly there was an analyst that analyzed the policy, said the weak link is if people got stirred up about the animal testing. So all the animal testing people suddenly got told that I wanted to test drugs on dogs and household pets and cats. We came out and said, hey, that's just lies. But the machine was rolling, and every town across New Zealand had people protesting in the streets, really well funded with placards saying, to save the dogs. John Key came on the news and said, I can't in all conscience imagine, hurting furry animals. This is the 2010 poisoning possums guy. And so everything got changed overnight, and they introduced a piece of legislation which had in it, the industry may not seek compensation for this overnight change. So I lost everything and had to go and get out of the country and go hide in Thailand for a few years, or avoid getting chased around for made-up tax bullshit. And so it was a big change in my life, and now I'm back, and I've probably got some comments to make about this.
Cool.
That's my intro.
So listen, I don't think we're going to legislate or debate over the pros and cons of party pills. You've just said a lot there. I don't have enough knowledge to challenge or agree or disagree or whatever you're going to say. I mean, we've been reading a bit about BZP party pills here and what doctors were saying in emergency rooms, etc., etc., etc. I don't feel the need to litigate that tonight, because the reason we've got you on is to now talk about, should Labor get back in, and although that's looking unlikely at the moment, unlikely, it's more of an uphill climb than the other side, and they were to say this industry of a less harmful substance in vaping, I think we probably all agree that compared to tobacco, it appears to be sort of a less harmful substance. No one's going to say it's not harmful at all, but maybe a less harmful substance. And they're not necessarily talking about regulating the substance, but the outlets that sell the substance, which will kind of do the same thing. What will that mean for the industry? And from someone who's been in a quote unquote less harmful substance area, how do you think that will work to solve the issue, if at all, of vaping, especially targeted at young people in New Zealand? Any thoughts?
Yeah, so I actually think this is largely about the optics. We're having a sudden policy introduced right before the election. So normally you have a look and see, sometimes that's the sound of cha-ching, a donation's been made. But look at this. Is it actually going to reduce the consumption? I don't think it is. Saying this needs to be more than 300 meters away from the school. Last time I checked, most kids have got a bus ticket. I don't think it's really going to cut down the amount of stuff that's being sold in schools, especially when they can still go to a gas station or a corner store. So it's really about optics. It's about appealing to parents and having the appearance of doing something that's going to manage risk, but it's just managing perceived risk and perception. What would be a better idea? And can a government do anything about it? I think really the issue is that the way that these things are presented, should children be allowed to go in there in the first place? The idea that I promoted at the time of, party pills, and what I'm going to carry on with future psychoactives, is that the person that's behind the counter between the drug and the consumer needs to really have some degree of understanding to be able to talk and monitor. And we have that a tiny little bit with liquor, and the culture and the liquor retailer is that if you're underage, you're not allowed in the door. So we need to do a similar sort of thing. But to me, that person needs to have some sort of qualification or training from the area of alcohol and drug clinical assessment before they're distributing anything. That would be my position. I don't think just moving them further away from the school is going to make any difference at all.
Chewy, do you want to jump in? I've got another question, but you're going to mute your mic there, Matt. You got a question there as well, Chewy? I've got other ones that I want to ask, but because of this mic thing, I want to make sure we've got space for all of us.
I think that's a good point. I guess if we're making a comparison with vapes and party pills and synthetic cannabis and that sort of thing, and I guess the parallels that we're seeing on how they're sold, is that we're seeing it being, I guess, a high margin product that are being sold through corner shops and dairies by de facto. What you're saying there is, I guess those people don't have the capacity to make assessments of being a responsible seller.
Are we talking about the person in the dairy doesn't have the knowledge to be the? But then again, you could say the 19-year-old in the liquor store doesn't really have that understanding either, do they? I mean, if we were...
Yeah, but I think that comparison between the responsibilities of liquor stores is a really apt one, right? You've got to have a duty manager who's responsible for and there's police legislation around.
So someone in the building has some kind of seniority and understanding. If it was a pub, it would be a publican would have to have some kind of license. Someone in the building and those sorts of things has some kind of knowledge or understanding, even if it's not the 19-year-old at the counter.
Like, there's a really established process of police going around and doing stings on liquor stores and making sure that they're not being sold to underages. I don't think we saw anything like that for party pills, synthetic cannabis, and now vapes. That framework doesn't exist. So if the government's thinking of cracking down on the number of, what was it, 7,000 or 8,000 down to about 600,
Yeah, that's about right. 7,000, I think, down to about 600.
Are they then
And
spinning
Matt, just so
up a
you know, we'll
framework?
stop talking in a second, then you can jump back in.
Yeah, I'm sure I've got a question in there somewhere. All right, here's my question. We have this framework around the selling of liquor. We have a similar framework and legislation around the selling of tobacco. Is the fact that we're spinning up a new product like vaping, or in the past like party pills or synthetic cannabis, is it time for a framework that just covers, in general, substances, in your opinion?
Yes, and the recommendations I made to the Law Commission back when we looked at this a while ago were that liquor and cigarettes and the other psychoactive drugs should all be covered together. But liquor and nicotine lobbied to be pulled out and dealt with separately, which made it kind of a little silly. So at the moment, we've got the government are talking about let's have a licensing regime. Well, that's great. But if you go to get, say, a driver's license, it indicates that you've been trained in the safe usage of a motor vehicle. If you get a firearms license, normally that means that you know how to shoot. Be good if they also teach you how to aim. Maybe they don't do that. But that's what it should encompass. There should be some training. And we're saying, well, here's something which has got a level of risk with it. We need to put that risk with some responsibility, and that responsibility should have training. So I believe, yes. And in fact, I, at the time, suggested that with the party pills, they should be pulled out of dairies and put into liquor, because at least the people there know how to ask for ID, and at least they've got a licensing authority that goes around and checks on them. If not, then we need to build another similar infrastructure. But if we don't have the resource to do that, we need to combine it. That was the recommendation which the Law Commission made to government, but as we know, liquor sort of pulled out of it. But it's all about relative levels of risk. And to me, I would just look at it from a technology perspective and say the nicotine is addictive. And so pairing the nicotine with the other fluids that are in that in the bottle is not such a good idea, because they are toxic. What we should be doing is looking at taking the nicotine and put it into a dry vaporizer. So you just inhale tobacco leaf like you do with cannabis leaf. That moves away from smoking, and it moves away from having all that vape stuff in your lungs. That's another question, though.
Okay, two questions to kind of wrap up from my side of things. You've probably already answered the first one. Actually, it's kind of 2.5 questions, because the first question's in two parts. It's like looking back to your experience and what you went through, especially when the banning of BZP party pills came out. What should they have done then? And leading on to what should they do now with the vaping from your experience? And I guess the second question is, do you have any positions on, certain countries around the world have just gone, hey, let's just make everything legal and make it a health issue rather than making it a prison issue? So yeah, what should they do now based on your experience of what they have done with vaping? And what do you think about just a big free for all and making them health issues rather than, criminal issues?
Okay, what they should have done with party pills, I noticed that in October last year, the Helen Clark Foundation reviewed methamphetamine and suggested what we need is some sort of substitution for amphetamine users, which is what we had. So what we should have done is just more tightly regulated that, waited a minute, brought it under the psychoactive substance regulation, which we did develop when the Law Commission set it up, and they should still be available, but from a clinician, not from the corner store. And with the other drugs, the same thing. And so then we look and say, okay, Portugal have just decriminalized all drugs, and it's great. A lot of the metrics are showing that that's working, but it's not the best that you can do. The best that we could do would be to manage the level of risk with a level of regulation which matches that level of risk. That's some commensurate sort of level. That's sensible regulation. That's what we should do with amphetamine substitutes and with nicotine substitutes and everything else where there's a level of risk and the community aren't sure about it. We should do the same thing as we do with medicines. We're concerned that someone might take so much, so you need to go and see a doctor, and then you need to go to the pharmacy. If something's as dangerous as that, it needs the same level of regulation. That's the most sensible way I can think of doing it.
All right. Hey, well, Chewy, you got to wrap up? You got any more questions you want to throw at Matt? And then this is really interesting, Matt. Thank you for jumping in tonight and having some chats. Chewy, sir?
No, I don't have anything really to add. This is a topic that I haven't read. Like I'm not a smoker. I don't take drugs. I have the occasional drink and that sort of thing, but I'm not a wowser. I'm aware that this stuff goes on, and I think the main thing for me is that people are safe and society's safe, and also that people aren't, I guess, putting just shit into people's bloodstreams or lungs just to turn a profit, really, is, I guess, my concern. But I think where this started, when they did review the drug laws around the early 2000s, is it was a massive missed opportunity and a massive fumbled ball that was heavily compromised by the amount of power that the alcohol and the tobacco industries can throw in to a hopefully a sensible debate about where do we go from here.
Matt, do you want
Well,
to
it was a
finish
missed
us-
opportunity,
finish us
but
up?
sorry, I thought it was my turn. It was a missed opportunity, but we do still have that legislation available. The only thing that happened was they threw a spanner in saying you're allowed to keep going as long as you can prove safety without using animals. And so the opportunity now is to develop technology for testing without using animals. And the other thing I would just say is that I agree totally that people shouldn't be just throwing rubbish in people's bloodstreams, but I think we need to have a transparency. Whether I'm selling a drug to get high or whether I'm presenting a drug which I'm saying, well, this is going to prevent you from catching a disease. If people are going to be asked to trust the science, then you can't also ask for 75 years of secrecy on your data. People need to be able to make informed decisions one way or the other. And we need to make sure we're not discriminating against people, whether they're saying yes to drugs or whether they're saying no.
Hey Matt, thank you for coming on tonight. Really appreciate it. I really enjoyed chatting with you. And there have been people in the chat who have been talking about Starboy, and so I'll just bring this image up, and then maybe in the last kind of 30 seconds, you can just tell people what Starboy is all about. And I'm assuming you're still active as Starboy.
Yeah, so Starboy is an interdimensional traveler, and it's sort of an alter ego creative expression. It's a progressive rock show, so we do immersive theatrical experiences. The idea is that this experience is so psychedelic that nobody needs to take any drugs. There's a couple of albums. You can go to mattbowden.com and you can watch a steampunk mini movie which we made in New Zealand, and I've got another album called Liberty Overtime coming out towards the end of the year, hoping to play at some festivals this summer. So mattbowden.com.
Let me just do that. I've just done it. I'll just bring out your website for you, but it's just taking a few seconds. There it goes. So if people want to find out more, mattbowden.com, BOWDEN.com, and we'll leave it there. Sir, thank you for joining us, Matt. Really appreciate you giving us some time. I appreciate you coming into the big smoke from out in the Wop Wops where Wi-Fi wasn't quite so good. And I'm sure we will connect again super soon. So thanks for coming. Appreciate your time, and all the best.